Well, today we want to talk a little bit about the food side of taking care of our families. You know, we've gotten a lot of questions about food. People are really concerned about being able to store food, have enough food for their families. And, you know, hey, we're in that situation. It is important. It's important all the time, but something like this really helps bring it to mind. You know, we've had many people ask, you know, a lot of the stores are going out of stock, and you see Azure's going out of stock on some things. That's true. Demand has gone up substantially. Many of our suppliers can't get things done in time. It's just most of it's taking more time. Some things are just out until new crop already. It's created a major difference. But Azure is committed, and we have a few things that we will not run out of stock of. Wheat, flour, those kinds of grains. We're going to be fine. We grow those things. We are saving back for our Azure customers all that we could possibly need. And Azure is committed. We are absolutely 100% committed to doing our absolute very best to have in stock these staple items that we're talking about here today.
And really, what better way to limit your exposure to the public and the potential coronavirus than to have your food delivered right to your community drop point or to your home?
So here at Azure, we have worked with food storage many times, back in 1998 and 99 when people were storing up for Y2K. Again in 2004 when we were storing up based on some worldwide food shortages, many people were storing up. So we have taken the feedback from thousands of customers who've done that. So this is years ago. What is it that's stored? How did things store? So what we're giving you next is based on those years of experience. So what should that be?
So this is a list of pantry staples that we have found to store very well. And I've been able to use these items to make really balanced meals for our family that have been healthy through the years. And we'll have these lists down in the description for you to copy if you would like to. So keep in mind, it's always best to store foods that your family normally eats. Your list may look different than ours. Let's break it into categories to make it easier. First, we'll start with grains and flours.
So when we're talking about grains, there's a couple of different categories that we can look at grains. So first of all, there's grains that we can just cook and eat, like rice and quinoa and millet. Then there's grains that need to be processed, like wheat and oat groats. So in those cases, you only want to store those grains if you have a way to process them. Don't store wheat if you don't have a flour grinder. Don't store oat groats unless you have an oat roller. If you do, they're much better to store in the whole grain. If you don't, you want to store flour. If you do not have a grinder, store flour. If you do not have an oat roller, store rolled oats. Both of those don't keep quite as well as the whole grain, but they keep very well. And then there's another category of grains that I think is really awesome, like popcorn, for instance. You can just pop that anywhere, over an open fire. Electricity's out, whatever. It makes it really easy. So I always store a little bit of those kinds of things.
And next, we have fats and oils.
So fats and oils are pretty important. They're very, very important for our health, but there's only really a few that store well. So coconut oil, or palm shortening, store almost indefinitely, very long time. Then there's oils like sunflower oil, safflower oil, and olive oil that will store quite a while, up to a year pretty well. But if you get much longer than that, you're going to want to keep rotating through that. Other oils like flax oil and stuff do not store well at all. So just don't stock up on that. Just use what you need, unless you're keeping it frozen or refrigerated.
And then we have nuts, seeds, and dried fruit.
And this is another category that it's very important that we get the right things. So certain nuts do keep well. For instance, almonds, peanuts, sesame seeds. But there are pretty limited that keep in dry storage. Many of the nuts, like Brazil nuts, pecans, cashews, and walnuts, you want to keep them frozen or refrigerated if you're going to keep them any length of time. because they will begin to break down and go rancid, and you do not want to eat rancid nuts. That's not a good plan. When you're talking about dried fruits, there's only a few that really will keep long periods of time. Like raisins and coconut will keep a long time. They'll get a little sugary, but they keep well. Many other dried fruits, even though they're dried, unless you re-dry them even drier, or have enough moisture in it so they're more edible and do not keep very well. So unless you have refrigeration or freezer space, limit the number of dried fruits that you store.
And next we have spices, seasonings, and condiments.
Now this is my favorite category, and many times the most forgotten category when people are storing food. So when we're talking about spices, many of these spices can double as medicine, and this is really, really important. So when we're talking about onion, garlic, cayenne, ginger, turmeric, apple cider vinegar, those things all are medicines as well as wonderful condiments. And then we talk about salt. That can also be used as a preservative of fresh foods, sauerkraut, things like that, meat. Those are very important not to forget and to have plenty of, because not only in a food storage situation would you need to have great flavored food, but these medicines are vitally important.
And our last category is sweeteners.
And sweeteners, many sweeteners store very well. In fact, most sweeteners do. Honey will store 1,000 years if it's stored properly. You know, coconut sugar stores well. Almost all this molasses stores almost indefinitely. Maple syrup, maybe not quite so long. You also need refrigeration for long-term storage on maple syrup. Stevia powder, monk fruit, all keep very well. So whatever you use in your family, if it's sweeteners, it'll probably keep well.
And remember, if you're a gardener, it's always a great idea to store those garden seeds as well.
So now that we've decided kind of what we're going to store, how do we store things so they keep a little bit longer?
Here are some options that we have found reliable.
So first of all, it depends how long you plan to store these things for. For very short-term storage, something you're going to use fairly quickly, you can just leave it in the bag that it comes in. This is how Azure typically ships our products, in paper bags, extremely environmentally friendly for everyday use, but will not store long periods of time because insects and stuff can get into this kind of a package. So for just a little bit longer storage and everyday use, a Gamma Seal bucket like this, also this size, comes with a very convenient lid. Just screws right out, and you can just get into it. Keeps insects and stuff out very well. Just take some out, screw it back shut. Very convenient. Probably not the best for extremely long, if you want, months or years. Also, glass gallon jars work wonderfully well for short, medium-term storage. If you get into long-term storage, then we have also the bucket is a great option, but you'll want to do a solid lid and not a gamma lid. You can actually then put a oxygen absorber pack into the bucket and clamp down your lid. I'll show you how to do that here in a few. Also, for long-term storage, the Mylar bag works really well. These bags are two different ways. They come with a zip tie in them. And so for everyday use, fill this up and just zip tie it shut. If you want to do long-term storage, you can also heat seal the top of the Mylar bag. For very long term, you can actually heat seal the Mylar bag and drop that into the bucket. And then you're into the very long-term storage. That will last for many years, 10 years, depending on what it is, but 5, 10, even 15 years, perfectly good products. All right, and for those of you who have not done this before, we'll just show you a few little quick tricks to make this really easy and simple. It is so much better to store these pantry staples than these freeze-dried, quick, instant meals for the health of your family and for the budget. One of my favorite everyday use and short-term, medium-term storage is the bucket with the Gamma Seal lid. This is the most useful. We use these every day in our house. So to get this on, to set it up, it's best to screw the center of the lid out first. Simply set it over the edge of the, and sometimes these are a little tight, especially on the 5-gallon size. So what I've done is just simply use a hammer and a little piece of wood and just pop it on, work your way around. So it's nice and tight on there. And then you can simply screw the middle on. Nice and tight. Go ahead then, take it off. Simply dump it in and screw the lid on. It's safe and sound. When you need to make popcorn next time, simply screw the lid off, scoop out what you need, you're all good to go. So now when we're doing a little bit longer term storage, then there's a little bit more to it. If we're using a bucket, we use a solid lid. Simply dump in, just like we did with the Gamma lid. However, once you dump it in, set the lid on, do the same thing, and just simply go around the lid, tamp it on so it's nice and tight and well sealed. That lid does not come off as easily. You actually have a little tab here that you have to tear to get the lid off again. So it will still stay on after you tear the tab on, but the hard seal then becomes broken. And your oxygen absorber, which you put in the bucket right before you put the lid on to keep long-term fresh, then more oxygen will come in, so it won't be as effective once you tear the tab. Before that, highly effective, whether you use the 5-gallon size or we have the solid lids for this size as well. And there's actually a 2.5-gallon as well for your convenience of whatever size makes the most sense for you and your family. So for the very long-term storage, we have the Mylar bags, which you can either put in a bucket or you can just store them on the shelf separately as well. It protects really well from insects, from pretty much everything except heat. The bucket actually protects really well from water as well, if there's moisture in your basement or wherever you may keep that. So simply, here's the paper bag that the stuff comes in. We just pop that open. So we go ahead and fill up your Mylar bag, and you can get it reasonably full. Then we put in an oxygen absorber pack for long-term storage. That will keep the oxygen out, so insects and stuff, and oxidization, it's basically oxidization that breaks down. So then go ahead and use the zip tie and go almost all the way across until you have just a little bit left in the corner. And then the way we do it is just stick in a straw. Then suck out the oxygen, nice and tight, seal the last little bit. So if you're doing really long longer food storage, then it's always best to, besides the zip tie that's in here, go ahead and heat seal the top. And you can do that for the stay-at-home model. Obviously, when we're doing heat seal bags, we have fancy units, but a regular clothes iron, for the most part, works really well. So just a little piece of wood down with the iron on here, and just simply move your way across. So now, you see, it's completely sealed, tight as a drum, airtight. When you want to open it, if you don't go down too far, you can simply just cut this little top part off with a scissor. Zip tie will still work perfectly well. And then, of course, you want to make sure you label it so we know what we have. So in this case, organic rolled oats. And if it's long-term storage, you can also take these, simply put them in the bucket, and then you have a double seal for very safe long-term storage. Now you have different ways to store: glass jars, gamma lids, sealed bucket, Mylar bag. These all work well. When you're storing though for best quality, remember, keep your product in as cool a place as you have available in your house. Some place that doesn't get a lot of direct heat. Basement, garage, cellar, wherever's the coolest. In our case, a pantry.
And that's a wrap. Have you ever created a food storage before? Comment below and let us know. And please remember to subscribe to our channel for our next video.